Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about what I think are some of the ideal things that make for an ideal kaiju figure. When it comes to what I think makes a good kaiju figure, there are three things that go into it: playability, likeness, and size. Those three things all together make for a perfect kaiju figure in my eyes, and if one of those things is lacking, it severely downplays like what I think makes for it being a good figure. Kaiju figures have been around since the dawn of the first Godzilla. You have like the old classic Sofubi figures from Bullmark and the like. You have the Bandai Movie Monster series, and we all remember the classic Trendmasters toy line. Here I have one of the old school Gamera Trendmasters figures. These ones are pretty rare. They were towards the later end of Trendmasters' life, to like just a little bit after the Godzilla 98 movie. These guys were not made in very high numbers and were pretty rare. Like I think only a few stores actually had them towards the end of their run. But here is one of like the pinnacles of kaiju figures in my eyes. This one's a loose one I found. I do have one in box that I have shown off before on my social pages. But here we have a perfect example of what I think makes for a good kaiju figure. Start with one, likeness. Likeness basically means like how much something represents what we see on screen. And to me, this is like a perfect representation of Gamera from his first movie, Guardian of the Universe, from the Heisei trilogy. That's what Trendmasters tended to base a lot of their figures on. The like Heisei movies from the 90s, which is when they had their runs. Their most popular one being the Godzilla King of the Monsters line that they did. Those ones are the ones that everyone remembers. Like, if you were a Godzilla fan growing up in those days, like there's a high chance you had at least one Trendmasters figure. In fact, for me, I know that I had one or two of those figures in my collection growing up. My first Godzilla figure I ever remember was a Trendmasters figure. And as you can see here, like the likeness is pretty spot on, but also there's like the playability factor. Playability basically means how well something is like playable, and like Gamera and Kaiju in general make for very toyetic figures. We all know the term toyetic. Star Wars, basically. Maybe Star Wars coined the term, but Star Wars is what really popularized it. But basically, like this thing has some good articulation. And even when it comes to articulation, I don't ask for much. Like sometimes it may be a hot take, but I always see people like rating the articulation of something like a Bandai or Sofubi figure. To me, it's not really that important, but like just the basics is all I ask for, which this has in spades. Because I mean, like, yeah, basically like elbow joint right there, up down his shoulder. His head actually plays into the articulation where I don't know if it's broken, but this one came with missing the missile, but it had a missile, and he did something here to where it shot out a missile. And that's basically where the articulation joint is. I don't know if you flip the head to do it, but I've seen videos here and there. And then basically the legs and the tail. I can't show it off well because of how I'm doing the camera, but so be it. And basically, like, the playability I think is really good. And then the third thing would be size. When it comes to the size of a kaiju figure, typically I think people like tend to be like go big or go home. Personally, when it comes to action figures in general, my preferred size is like this, like almost 4-inch range. And here we have the Otachi, which is from a recent line of Pacific Rim figures that came out recently by Todd McFarlane's company, which I think is a pretty decent toy. When it comes to like my ratings of it, like you have the likeness. I think the likeness is very well done. Sculpt is highly detailed. Playability, I think it's okay. It has some basic joints. I think maybe a head one would have done well. Maybe a little more in the legs. But it's decent for what it is. Paint could have been better too, the likeness. I think that's the only thing, because the other figures in the line I think were really well painted in terms of likeness. I don't know why this really, if anything, it's more akin to like the baby that came out of her in the movie, because they also had toys of that, and this is most like that. But other than that, the sculpt makes up for it. The size, for one thing, I mentioned this is like the 4-inch scale. Scales pretty well with the Gamera here. I think Gamera is a little bulkier than what would be, considering this is more of like an basic action figure. It's in that realm of being like those high scale collectible figures, but also pretty toyetic. So it's like in that weird in between, where like it's collector and I guess kid friendly, if you want to like play with it. So within my ratings, I think these are good figures. Something like Gamera, I think, would top Otachi here when it comes to my ratings of like playability, likeness, and size, which again are the 3 important things when it comes to making a good kaiju figure. And I guess also figures in general for me, but specifically talking kaiju figures, I think this is like the perfect examples of what I need for an awesome kaiju figure. Just looking at like the size here, like they fit perfectly in my hands. Like I can get decent things with just one hand and like, you know, have them fight. Like this is just perfect for just like handling them, because you know I'm a guy who like likes to fidget too, so having a physical item here that can like just, you know, play with in my hand. And these are like decent like hardy figures, I think. Like surely something like this might break if you bang it against the wall. Something like this feels a little more durable. Also, when it comes to material is a thing I tend to flip-flop a lot on, but typically Otachi I think is a good example of how I would do some figures. His main body is like this soft plastic rubber, like these little prongs here are a little flexible. His tails has a bendy wire, which I think is cool for this figure because I can get him in a straight pose like this, which I prefer. But typically for things like this, I've talked to a lot of like my sculptor friends, you would have it posed outward originally, so that you can get a good range of motion when you bend it. But I think this was sculpted in a curving figure. I'm not sure if it picks up here, but when I first bent it, some of the like stretch marks appeared in the like sculpting details, so I don't really mess with that much. So yeah, I guess that would also add into something else, which is proportions, which I guess can go into the likeness of a figure with whatever style you'd make it in. When it comes to action figures like these, I typically want it to be as proportionate as they were in the movies, with some leeway for stylization. Like Trendmaster figures were always pretty stylized. If you look at the Gamera line specifically for Trendmasters, Gamera was pretty much the only one that was really screen accurate. Maybe Gyaos as well. But the other ones were pretty stylized. And actually some of those were from creatures that never appeared in the Gamera Heisei trilogy. So that you could pretty much chalk them up as like original designs of maybe what could have been in the Heisei films. But other than that, they were pretty stylized. But I tend to go for likeness of a character versus like the style of it, which again links back to like the paint job here. Like if it had a movie accurate paint job, like perfect figure all the way, I think. And like also price, I mean this here was like $20, and it came with like a little it came with vehicles, and it came with like a city building set piece, as well as a comic. So you get a lot for $20, which on its own, like I think even $15 would be worth it. Like if you just got this, or maybe $10. Like the new Playmates figures are $10, but I think this is a little higher quality wise. Like Playmates has size to it; they're in a 6-inch range, which for me is my personal limit for kaiju
All
figures.
in all, those would be my main things when it comes to what makes a perfect kaiju figure. The size of the figure, how well it fits in my hand, the likeness, how well it looks to the screen character, the playability of it, like how well can you get when it comes to like the range of motion and like how it handles. With me, I'm a very like physical type of guy. I like having a physical thing in my hand to hold and fidget with. So having figures like those really just feels natural to me, and having those qualities in a good kaiju figure, being a kaiju fan, really makes me appreciate the world of action figures in general. I one day hope to be a figures designer and have my own company to where I would make the ideal toys like to my standards. And hopefully the rest of you guys will agree. But let me know what you look for in a kaiju figure down below. Tell me what were some of your favorite figures, maybe even like your own childhood figure growing up. What was that one figure you had that you always took to school, walked around with at the playground, things like that. Anyways, hopefully you guys can support me on the channel. Let me know what you thought. Leave a like, subscribe, and maybe we'll continue to talk on my other social medias. But have a good day, guys, and thanks for your time.